Hi there, Matt Lawton here with your Astrological Winds channel, and we're going to look at the medium range forecast for the month of March. Looking at just four major energies that I think are going to be the main influence of this month, and two of them actually being a little bit bigger than the other two. The first thing I'd like to mention, the first shift that we'll see is on March 9th. That is when Mercury retrograde goes direct. And at that point, at 28 degrees Aquarius. So as soon as the winged messenger turns around, he's going to head right back to Pisces again. And I think a lot of the Piscean energy that's been going on mainly throughout this Mercury retrograde period, and that includes the Sun in Pisces too. I think on reflection on a lot of what I've seen in the world the last 2 weeks is like Pisces is like full of idealism and wanting something, a perfect world in the sense of like compassion and empathy and our ideals, our higher ideals being appealed to. And I think a lot of this Mercury retrograde period has shown how, unfortunately, a lot of those ideals are being disappointed right now. And Pisces can definitely set up energy for itself that can be disappointing or discouraging, because when our ideals fail us, it can leave us feeling lost and wondering what to do. And I think a lot of this Mercury and Pisces retrograde energy has been trying to show us that Mercury is definitely a trickster and doesn't function very well in Pisces. So a lot of what we may have for our ideas and thoughts now can be elusive or delusive. And I think Mercury is really trying to show us like part of a reality check in that sense. So that energy is actually going to continue for a while, because even though Mercury is going direct, it's headed right back into Pisces again for several weeks. And what a lot of people call the shadow period of Mercury retrograde 2 will definitely continue for, probably a week, 2 or 3 even. I don't necessarily know if it continues all the way to the point of where Mercury turned retrograde like a lot of other astrologers do, because you'd almost feel like Mercury would almost always be retrograde or in a shadow period. But for sure, while it's still going through Pisces, it's not going to be functioning at its normal way of functioning, at an acute intellectual logical way of approaching things. It's still going to be lost in the imagination and idealism during that time. But I think we're going to be able to reflect on a lot of the things that, ideally we'd like to see happen and are not. And just as one example of that, this is a really good example actually. We'll look out into the world and see examples how on Super Tuesday, a lot of people who were left or liberal leaning Democrats really thinking that that part of the Democratic Party would take the Democratic primaries and run with them, were finding out that that's not actually the case. So their idealism, which were they're riding this Piscean wave, hit the shores of reality. And they found out that maybe it's not going to be so easy to put their man or their candidate or their ideals into office, into reality. So that's just a good example. Now, one of the two main things that's going to happen in March, and this one's pretty big from my perspective, is Chiron, now in Aries, and will be in Aries for several years at least, is squaring the nodal axis. Our nodal axis is in Cancer Capricorn right now, the north and south nodes of the moons. So, Chiron in Aries is, for me, I think the best term to use for Chiron in Aries is being self-responsible for our own healing, being self-responsible for our own teaching, taking responsibility for our own wounding. Stop passing the blame around. Realizing that our own decisions led us to the point where we're at now. And everyone has wounds or weaknesses to deal with. And I think Chiron and Aries is like, listen, you need to take responsibility for this stuff. No one is going to come in here and save you if you're not willing to save yourself first. So you have to be a peaceful warrior here for yourself. You have to do the right thing for yourself first. Squaring the nodal axis, Chiron in Aries, means you can expect a lot of trouble in groups and associations and relationships, especially relationships that are bigger than just one-to-one. You may find yourself at conflict with a lot of the different groups in your life. And at this point, you have to really assess what those groups and how they're serving you. Are those groups actually feeding your wounding and keeping you in a cycle of wounding? Or are they challenging you to move ahead? And part of that is taking responsibility for yourself. So I think part of this with the Aries energy is realizing that life has to be balanced too. Like it can't always be like pushing and expanding and ambition and looking for the gold at the end of the rainbow, basically. That you have to come back to reality and deal with everyday existence too. And look at that as part of your adventure too. We have to be brave and strong with ourselves to admit where we've wronged ourselves and where we've hurt ourselves. Admit to the road that we took that got us to this point. And where do we go from here? I think that, it can be a lot more courageous to admit where you were wrong and try to correct those things than to continue to fight the rest of the world and try to prove everyone else wrong. And that's what Aries can do when it's lost when it's pushing the more negative parts of Aries energy. Instead, it has to take responsibility for its own healing, take responsibility for the way that groups work that you belong in, and how you relate to them, and what was your part in getting there to that point. So it's a hero's journey for sure. And it'll take a lot of courage to admit where we were wrong. But that's how we have to face our pain and start to go through it. So, really, an apex where this energy gets exact on March 13th, that really has been in effect for probably about a month and will continue for at least another month. So you can expect a lot of challenge and tension in groups that you belong to, and trying to find your right place in that, and whether that's the right group for you, or whether you need to go find another group, or whether you need to go strike out alone and figure out what's going on inside you first before you find the right group. Definitely challenging times. And I don't expect a lot of people to respond to this in really a conscious way. From what I see, people are so entrenched in their positions that they're going to end up being that warrior who fights to the end and realizes he's the only one left, all alone. Time to change our ways. It will be not an easy challenge. Okay, real big shift also is coming with Saturn. Saturn will be going into Aquarius this month. And still very strong in Aquarius. Saturn rules Capricorn, also rules Aquarius. And it will be in Aquarius until July 2nd. Now, Saturn's going to actually go retrograde on the 11th of May at about 2 degrees Aquarius. So then it'll start backtracking. And by July 2nd, it'll be back into Capricorn again. So, and then later in the year, we'll return to Aquarius and then stay there for over 2 years. And we'll make its great conjunction with Jupiter early next year in Aquarius. So, Saturn in Aquarius versus Saturn in Capricorn, both about systems, both about structure, both about ways of doing things that work. When it's in Capricorn, it's kind of like sticking to more traditional ways of doing things. When it goes into Aquarius, this is where it realizes there's a higher octave, that there's higher wisdom, higher knowledge that can be applied to any system in your life so that it can be improved. So that's what Saturn in Aquarius is really about. And Saturn is it's one of our 2 social planets. So it operates more on a societal level. And I think right now what a lot of it's going to have to do with in the next 2 or 3 years is using science, using technology to try to improve or help a lot of the systems that are breaking down around us. Saturn in Aquarius is like very concerned with the group and group standards. So, but it's also clear and sure about the ideals that it has. And although it may not want to revolutionize its systems by throwing them out and replacing them. It does want to evolutionize its systems by putting in new knowledge, new ideals that help improve how the system works. So this is a pretty big shift for sure when an outer planet changes signs. And on a personal level, I would say it's basically you need to stand up for your beliefs that they may not completely jive with what is society's accepted traditional belief systems, but that you need to stand up for them, believe in them, try to inject them some way in the things that you have influence over that affect society, even in the smallest ways, so that it can help improve the things that are going on today, the systems that we have in place, the structures that we have in place are all ready for a jump in evolution. So like I said, it's going to start and be in Aquarius for about 4 months and head back to Capricorn for a while before turning direct again and going back into Aquarius. Now, the last thing I'd like to mention is Mars for March. And Mars is March's month. Mars. So Romans named Mars after, or March after, the god Mars, and a lot of people don't realize that Mars is actually the god of agriculture too, so that's why he was given the month of March when you started the agricultural season. And that's Mars in his peaceful aspect. That's the Mars that, can be worked with and not be an egotistical, aggressive kind of Mars. This is the Mars that's willing to work hard and be ambitious and move forward. And we have Mars in Capricorn right now, but Mars will be going into Aquarius too this month, just like Saturn will be the end of the month on March 30th. But prior to that, remember we have the Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn right at the very end of Capricorn. Saturn is anyway. So Mars in Capricorn is going to conjunct those 3 planets at the end of the month, and therefore trigger all of that energy, all that Capricorn energy that we were talking about in January again. So, Mars conjunct Jupiter will give lots of energy, lots of wanting to push ahead, lots of wanting to expand, but it's in Capricorn, it's in a traditional area, so it's going to favor those traditional areas. But then it's going to conjunct Pluto. And Mars conjuncts Pluto, that can be an explosive energy. That can be like explode into violent acts. It can explode into disaster type scenarios, but it also can rip open the ability to transform, to take actions and transform ourselves, to create new changes, push out the old, bring in the new. So it's like a purging going on, and it's very active, it's strong, it's aggressive energy. And then, like I said, we'll hit Aquarius on the 30th, and that's when people will definitely, their actions will be driven by their ideals, and they will be very strong-willed, stubborn about that. So you can really, really push that Aquarian energy I was talking about with Saturn going into Aquarius when Mars joins it. That will give the initiative, the energy, the motivation to move forward and improve those systems, to actually take personal action. Mars will spur us to be motivated and ambitious, to take our own personal action on that level. So it'll be conjuncting Saturn right at the end of the month. And when Mars conjuncts Saturn, usually there's a restriction in the flow of that energy. And it has to slow down and it has to move cautiously in order to be successful. And it's like a reality check, especially after Mars Jupiter and Mars Pluto, because Mars Jupiter may give us some huge ideas, and Mars Pluto may give us the motivation to push those ideas forward. But Mars Saturn may be like, whoa, let's take a look at this in reality and see what we're really doing and how this is going to affect things. So an interesting month for sure coming up. I still think the Saturn into Aquarius is going to be, not the biggest noticeable shift, because it's really going back to Capricorn and still very similar to, Saturn being very strong and operating well. But that Chiron squaring the North Nodes, Chiron and Aries squaring the North Nodes, I think a lot of us, especially post Mercury retrograde in Pisces, are really going to get a good chance to see where we kind of mess ourselves up, hurt ourselves, how we kind of attract people into our lives that actually enable us to continue to do that, and how we need to take responsibility for that and admit that we got ourselves to the place we're in and start moving forward from that place. All right. That's our March long-term or medium-term weather forecast for the astrology here on Astrological Winds channel. This is Matt Lawton, and I'll be signing off now. Anybody needs any kind of astrological services, readings, I'm always available at Matt, M-A-T-T, H-U-E, at 823 at gmail.com. One more time, Matt, H-U-E, 823 at gmail.com. And until next time, peaceful traveling, be a brave and strong warrior out there for your path.